private notice question on Greenland. Diplomatic efforts and tariff impact. Lord Ahmad of Wimbledon.
My Lords, I beg to leave to ask a question which I have given private notice. The question is as follows. To ask His Majesty's Government, in light of recent developments in relation to Greenland, what assessment they've made of the impact of proposed US trade tariffs on the UK economy, and what diplomatic efforts they are making to ensure the sovereign rights of nations to their territories.
I'm grateful to the Noble Lord, and it's always good to hear him speak on these issues. As the Prime Minister stated this morning, the use of tariffs against allies is completely wrong. It's not the right way to resolve differences within an alliance. Any decision about the future status of Greenland belongs to the people of Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark alone. The Prime Minister spoke to both President Trump and Prime Minister Frederiksen yesterday, as well as other key partners.
My Lords, may I first welcome and fully align myself, and I think I speak for most, if not all, in your Lordship's House, that we're at one with the government's position on that. I welcome the recent statements by all political leaders in this respect. However, if I could press the Minister further, firstly on the actual tariffs themselves, what are the implications of that 10%, particularly with the negotiations on the existing agreement that has been made for exports such as car manufacturing? 17.4% of our exports go to the US. They need to have long-term planning. What assessments have been made in that respect, and what briefing has been given to them? And secondly, bearing in mind that the President of the United States is going to be in Europe at Davos, surely now is the time for the British government to convene an emergency meeting of the NATO alliance to address the issues of long-term security of the alliance, and importantly, not just the sovereign rights of Greenlanders and the sovereign rights of Denmark, but for other territories around the world.
Yeah. Well, as Noble Lords would imagine, we are speaking, this is happening in real time, but constantly with our friends and allies and partners in NATO and beyond. And any meetings that are needed to be convened, I'm sure, will happen. As far as the impact of these tariffs would be, they would be extremely damaging, not least to our car industry, to aerospace, life sciences, to steel. And it's not something that we wish to see happen, and we do hope that this proposal can be averted.
It's obvious to everyone, I now feel, that the US President is an unserious person, but whose actions have very serious consequences. The threat from the US to not only a very close ally in the European Union, but a NATO partner, and then to punish us for standing with them is utterly reprehensible. The PM, as the Minister said, the actions are completely wrong, but the government refuses to raise a formal complaint to the WTO, whose rules these are trashing. He said that they're completely wrong because they're economic coercion, but has refused to put in place protective anti-coercion measures. What is the point of saying something is completely wrong when you do completely nothing as a result of it?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's called diplomacy, and our aim is to de-escalate the situation and not to take measures which would inevitably cause this to escalate and get more damaging for our manufacturers and for people's jobs and livelihoods in the United Kingdom.
Mind the House of my interest. Can I congratulate the government on the line that they're taking? If the US were to ask nicely, then they could actually have all the military bases, all the military personnel that they would wish for. They chose to withdraw the personnel after the Cold War. My understanding is that China has negotiated contracts to extract the minerals in Greenland. So if the US was to barge in an aggressive way, what do you think, what does the Noble Lady, the Minister, think would happen to the Chinese rights to mine, which have already been negotiated?
Well, I do appreciate the Noble Lady takes a strong personal interest, for reasons that I understand, in what happens in Denmark and also in Greenland. I don't think it helps anybody to speculate about what we would do if certain things were to happen. But can I also respond by saying, as I should have done in my initial remarks, just to thank the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch for the support that she has given to the government in regards to the position that we've taken this morning.
The Prime Minister has said that Greenlanders must have a say in what's happening, and I fully accept that. Why then, tell us what's the difference between not allowing the Chagossians to have any say at all in us selling the Chagos Islands off and paying for that pleasure of sending it to Mauritius?
As I think we examined at length through the progress of the bill, the right to self-determination isn't something that you can claim for yourself. It is something that can be legally determined. And when this question was tested before every court which has considered it so far, including here in the UK, the Chagossians, and we can all have our own personal feelings and emotions in reaction to this, I know I do, but the legal situation is that the Chagossians do not have the right of self-determination as regards to the Chagos archipelago, but that the Greenlanders do, and we respect their right to self-determination. What happens to Greenland is a question for them and for the Kingdom of Denmark.
My Lords, I'll resist the temptation to pursue that last question. The noble lady will be relieved to know. The Prime Minister is right to tell President Trump on this occasion that he is wrong. Imposing tariffs for pursuing the collective security of NATO and supporting the absolute right of self-determination for the people of Greenland is madness. It's also the case that many members of Congress on both sides of the aisle also think that Trump is wrong on this. So can the noble lady tell the House what steps we are taking to utilise our considerable diplomatic presence in Washington to utilise and build on that support in helping to persuade Trump to back down?
Well, we do talk with relevant partners as appropriate, but the main conversations that have happened between the United Kingdom and the United States have taken place between our Prime Minister and President Trump, and most recently yesterday there may have been more contact since then that I'm not aware of, but I think that is the right level at which to address such a serious situation.
My Lords, I've never been one to underplay a threat. But does my noble friend the Minister not agree that there seems to be no intelligence assessments whatsoever to say there is an immediate threat to the mainland of the land of Greenland, and it's extraordinary that things are being done at this pace, and we need to take a deep breath, look at the intelligence assessments and assess what the real threat and the real situation is before doing anything?
I think the noble Lord is encouraging us to be calm and to respond thoughtfully but clearly. And luckily, that is the approach that our Prime Minister is taking.
My Lords, there's a very notable difference in tone between the response of many of our European allies and Sir Keir Starmer to the actions and words of President Trump. Does the noble lady, the Minister, think that the softly approach of the United Kingdom is having a positive impact, or is indeed it inviting further aggressive actions and words?
I actually watched the Prime Minister's statement this morning, and I wouldn't describe it at all as softly. I think it was very clear what the United Kingdom stands for and what we think of this proposal. And the Prime Minister stood there publicly, laid that out for people to make their own assessment of where they think we are. So I think that the right thing to do is to carry on in that vein. That served us well up until now. And I think that our Prime Minister does have a good relationship and the respect of President Trump, much to many people's surprise, I might add. Nevertheless, that is where we are, and I think he is, he's someone I know quite well, and I would say that he's actually quite well suited to this kind of diplomacy.
Hear the Minister talk about diplomacy is very reassuring, I'm sure, my Lords. But would you not agree that to back up that diplomacy, bringing forward a credible plan as to how we're going to meet our spending obligations in defence to meet our NATO obligations would be very sensible, and publishing the defence industrial plan now would be a very good way of backing up that diplomacy?
Well, I mean, it's Monday, and these announcements were made at the weekend, so I think there will be further announcements made. The defence industrial strategy, I agree, investment strategy is, I agree, incredibly important, but I think it needs to be published when it's ready. and that we shouldn't be rushed into doing things before that.
Lords, I agree with many noble lords already who've spoken about the importance of diplomacy in this, but yet I feel there's a danger that diplomacy takes place at a very high level over the heads of the Greenlanders themselves. It was only a few days ago in this chamber that my right reverend friend, the Lord Bishop of Chester, who unfortunately is not able to be with us just yet this afternoon, asked particularly about could we strengthen our diplomatic ties in Nuuk itself with the Greenlanders directly, because I think that would give a lot of moral support. It would also mean that Britain's government would have a much better understanding of what the Greenlanders themselves are thinking rather than what other people are telling them to think.
Well, I do agree that this does need to have the Greenlanders at the heart of it, and I'm pleased that many ministers have met with their counterparts in Greenland, and not just in response to recent events, but this is a long-standing arrangement that we have. But I think he makes a really strong point that diplomacy should never happen somewhere else. And I think what's being proved with recent events is that geopolitics isn't something that happens out there away from here. It has a direct impact on people's jobs, on their livelihoods, on our manufacturing industry, in almost every element of life in the United Kingdom. And that's why this is being taken quite so seriously by the government.
Crossbench. Much of what has been said so far is of the respectful and firm way in which the intergovernmental dimension of the relationship is reacting to this news. Tomorrow, of course, we have the opportunity for some of the interparliamentary dimension to react, because we had the visit of Mr. Mike Johnson, who's Speaker of the US House of Representatives. And I wondered if the noble lady the Minister would feel it's helpful if we do, as parliamentarians, reflect the same respectful and firm tone on this issue in an interparliamentary dimension as well.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't dream of advising noble lords or my good friends at the other end of the building on what they should and shouldn't say to a visiting speaker from the United States. But I do think that he makes a good point there about having clarity in the position, which I think is widely held, if not unanimously held, at least within this chamber, as regards Greenland.
My lords, if I may revert to the matter of NATO referred to by my noble friend Lord Ahmed, a defensive and strong alliance such as NATO is requires, in addition to resource, two vital components: unity of purpose amongst the members and cohesion, a seamless cohesion amongst the members. The recent pronouncements by President Trump has frankly thrown a bucket of sand into the engine room. So may I ask the noble Lord the Minister to discuss with our colleagues in the Ministry of Defence convening an urgent meeting of NATO, if only to reassert what all of us believe NATO to exist for, and to underpin that, while one member may have an aberrant view, the rest of us are totally united in why we need NATO, why we want NATO, and why we support NATO.
Well, can I just start by completely agreeing with her in what she says about unity of purpose, and that's why the Prime Minister made the statement that he did this morning. When it comes to what meetings to hold, who should convene them, when that should happen, I will leave that to others to determine, but she can rest assured that, of course, I am speaking regularly with colleagues in the MOD about this and other issues.
My Lords, could the noble lady, the Minister, assist the House in informing us which 8 wars President Trump has ended?
I'm afraid I'm not responsible for interpreting statements of anybody other than myself.
Can the Minister confirm that under the 1951 agreement between the US, Denmark and Greenland, the United States has very considerable existing powers to establish military bases in Greenland? Has the Prime Minister emphasised this point to the President?
Well, there are many ways that the current situation and the concerns that the United States has could be resolved, and what matters is that they are done collegiately, diplomatically, and they are done in a way that is respectful of the alliance that we are all part of. So we are hopeful that that is what can come about.
In terms of diplomacy, as the noble lady the Minister said, if that is the foremost approach of the government, in continuing the line of my noble friend Lord Purvis, could I ask When will the WTO be brought into that diplomacy, and has the government already reached out to the WTO about these particular tariffs?
Well, I think, my response is the same, essentially, in that we will take decisions about who to involve, what measures to use, which institutions to involve. At a point, at every stage, the test of what we do and when and who it is will be, is this intervention likely to improve the situation and de-escalate and bring us closer to resolution, or is it something that's likely to make negotiations more difficult and to raise the temperature and to make a straightforward resolution harder to achieve? And that's the test that we will apply at every stage.
My Lords, it may be an appropriate moment to allow a short pause before I call the next business.